What if I told you that being a good man may be the very reason you are overlooked, disrespected, and exploited? What if kindness, when misunderstood, becomes a silent signal of weakness that predators can sense from miles away? Today, we confront a paradox that few dare to admit. Goodness without strength does not inspire respect, it invites manipulation. Throughout history, human relationships have operated on the subtle balance between power and vulnerability. Niccolo Machiavelli, writing more than 5 centuries ago, observed a reality that psychology now confirms: people are primarily motivated by self-interest, not by moral virtue. This insight, controversial in its time, has become a foundation for modern behavioral science. When we analyze the so-called nice guy syndrome, we are not merely examining social behavior, we are studying a systemic pattern of exploitation, reinforced by evolutionary psychology and social conditioning. The archetype of the nice guy is familiar to all of us. He is the individual who consistently says yes, who sacrifices his needs for others, who seeks validation through compliance. On the surface, these behaviors appear noble, but beneath this mask lies a troubling psychological mechanism, a fear of rejection, and a subconscious belief that acceptance is earned through submission. Research in social psychology demonstrates that those who consistently place others above themselves without boundaries inadvertently communicate low self-worth. In turn, others, whether consciously or not, assign them a lower status in the social hierarchy. Consider how human groups function. Status is not distributed randomly, nor is it assigned purely based on kindness. It is determined by perceived value, confidence, and the ability to enforce boundaries. When an individual fails to assert these boundaries, they are unconsciously signaling to others that their needs are negotiable. This is why the nice guy often becomes the default problem solver, the unpaid therapist, or the financial safety net for irresponsible friends. He is not respected for his generosity. He is consumed by it. Machiavelli's enduring relevance lies in his insistence that power is not aggression, but strategy. Power is the art of understanding human nature and acting in alignment with reality rather than illusion. A man who believes that kindness alone secures loyalty is ignoring the basic principle of reciprocity. People respect those who protect their own interests, who can say no, and who demonstrate that their time has measurable value. Without this foundation, kindness is not perceived as strength, but as opportunity. In modern psychological terms, this behavior reflects a lack of assertiveness, a skill distinct from aggression. Assertiveness is the ability to express one's needs and protect one's boundaries without hostility. A truly respected individual is not the one who endlessly accommodates, but the one who strategically decides when to give and when to withhold. This is the essence of self-respect, and by extension, the foundation of external respect. By the end of this exploration, we will uncover how to transform from being the perpetual nice guy into someone who commands respect without shouting, who is valued without begging for approval, and who operates from a place of strategic strength rather than desperate kindness. The first step in this journey is clear: stop equating constant agreeableness with virtue. Instead, recognize it as a dangerous form of self-betrayal. At the core of human interactions lies a difficult truth: people are more attuned to signals of strength than to signals of goodness. This is not cynicism, it is a psychological survival mechanism. From early human societies to modern organizations, individuals who project confidence, boundaries, and strategic decisiveness are perceived as leaders, while those who avoid conflict or endlessly accommodate are perceived as followers, or worse, as expendable. The nice guy mentality collapses under this framework because it is built on a flawed assumption that people will naturally reciprocate kindness with respect. In practice, respect is not a guaranteed outcome of generosity. In fact, research on dominance and prestige hierarchies demonstrates that respect is often awarded to those who impose standards, create scarcity of their time, and demonstrate independence. The paradox is simple yet brutal. The more available and self-sacrificing you are, the less valuable you become in the eyes of others. Let us examine this through everyday scenarios. Imagine a friend who never refuses a request. Initially, his willingness to help may be appreciated. But over time, his compliance becomes predictable. He is no longer seen as a generous ally, but as a resource to be tapped whenever convenient. Contrast this with another friend who occasionally says no, who prioritizes his own commitments, and who chooses deliberately when to extend support. His assistance carries weight because it is selective. The distinction here is not about morality, it is about perceived value. Machiavelli warned that human beings remember personal losses more vividly than acts of kindness. Modern cognitive psychology confirms this principle through the concept of loss aversion. People are more motivated to avoid losses than to pursue equivalent gains. In relational terms, this means that boundaries, when enforced, leave a stronger psychological impression than generosity alone. When others encounter resistance, when they realize there are consequences to overstepping, they recalibrate their behavior. This brings us to the principle of strategic ruthlessness. The term may sound harsh, but it does not imply cruelty. Rather, it is the disciplined willingness to act decisively when someone disrespects your time, energy, or trust. Strategic ruthlessness is about alignment between actions and values. If someone repeatedly cancels on you, the nice guy grants infinite forgiveness, hoping the person will eventually change. The strategic individual, however, recognizes the pattern, withdraws future invitations, and reclaims his time. This subtle act of disengagement signals strength, not hostility. To practice this, one must redefine what it means to be good. True goodness is not passive submission. It is the ability to balance empathy with discernment. It is recognizing when your generosity is uplifting others versus when it is enabling dysfunction. Without this clarity, you risk becoming the silent partner in your own exploitation. The psychological foundation of this shift lies in assertiveness training and boundary setting. Therapists who work with individuals struggling with people-pleasing often begin by teaching the client to tolerate discomfort. Saying no will inevitably create tension. But this temporary discomfort is the gateway to long-term respect. It communicates self-worth more powerfully than endless yeses ever could. In the next stage of our analysis, we will turn to the role of emotional discipline, a skill that once mastered transforms your entire social presence. Because without control over your emotions, even strong boundaries can be undermined. If boundaries are the framework of respect, then emotional discipline is the foundation upon which that framework rests. Human beings are not only social animals, but also emotional creatures, and in every interaction, emotions act as both signals and vulnerabilities. The individual who cannot master his emotional responses becomes transparent, predictable, and therefore easily manipulated. The individual who remains composed, however, projects an aura of strength that others instinctively respect. Psychologists describe this dynamic as emotional regulation, the ability to experience feelings fully while choosing deliberate responses rather than impulsive reactions. For men trapped in the nice guy cycle, the inability to regulate emotions often manifests in two extremes: either constant over-accommodation to avoid conflict, or sudden disproportionate bursts of frustration when boundaries are finally crossed. Neither response commands respect. One signals weakness, the other instability. Both erode credibility. Consider the workplace as a laboratory of power dynamics. A manager who panics under pressure loses authority instantly, regardless of competence. In contrast, a leader who remains calm during crises inspires confidence even if solutions are not immediate. The lesson here is not that emotion must be eliminated, but that it must be strategically directed. Emotional control allows you to slow the pace of decision-making, to evaluate alternatives, and to respond in a manner that aligns with long-term interests rather than short-term impulses. Machiavelli, though writing centuries before the advent of psychology, anticipated this principle. He argued that the appearance of composure, even when one feels uncertain, reinforces authority. Modern research echoes this. People unconsciously mirror the emotional states of those around them. A man who radiates calm becomes an anchor in turbulent situations, while a man who displays nervousness or desperation invites doubt. Practical examples illustrate how small shifts in emotional control create outsized effects. When insulted, the instinctive reaction is to defend or retaliate. Yet the controlled silence of a calm response can be more powerful than any verbal counterattack. Silence in this context exposes the aggressor's insecurity and denies them the satisfaction of provoking you. Similarly, when pressured to make a quick decision, the emotionally reactive person caves under urgency. The disciplined individual, however, simply says, "I need time to think," reclaiming both authority and clarity. This capacity for measured response is not innate, it must be trained. Cognitive behavioral techniques, for example, encourage individuals to pause, reframe, and question their initial interpretations of events before responding. Through repetition, this practice builds what psychologists call response flexibility, the ability to choose actions that serve your goals rather than reactions that satisfy temporary feelings. Why does this matter for respect? Because people trust those who are consistent, reliable, and difficult to provoke. Emotional volatility undermines reliability, while composure under pressure signals strength. This explains why leaders in every field, from politics to business to personal relationships, rise in stature when they display calm authority in moments of crisis. Mastering emotional discipline transforms not only how others perceive you, but also how you perceive yourself. You begin to act less from fear of rejection and more from alignment with your own principles. Respect in this sense is not merely demanded from others, it is cultivated internally first. As we progress, the next critical dimension emerges: the deliberate construction of one's image. For in human society, perception often becomes reality. Without managing how others see you, all internal discipline risks remaining invisible. Every social interaction carries with it an unspoken judgment. Long before people understand your intentions, they interpret your signals. In psychology, this is known as thin slicing, the human ability to form lasting impressions from very limited exposure. Studies consistently show that within seconds of meeting someone, we make durable assumptions about their competence, authority, and trustworthiness. This is why image is not superficial. It is structural. It is the lens through which every action is interpreted. Machiavelli captured this truth with the assertion, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." In modern terms, this means that your inner character, no matter how noble, remains largely invisible, unless it is reinforced by external signals. The nice guy often fails here, believing that sincerity alone will eventually reveal itself. He neglects to curate his presence. Consequently, his openness, constant apologies, or lack of boundaries are read not as kindness, but as weakness. Controlling your image begins with intentionality. Ask yourself, how do I want to be perceived? Then ensure that your behaviors consistently reinforce that perception. If the goal is to be respected, over-explaining, over-apologizing, and over-accommodating must be eliminated. These behaviors signal uncertainty. Instead, concise speech, deliberate body language, and selective availability convey value. When you demonstrate that your time is scarce and your decisions are purposeful, others begin to treat your presence as significant. Consider the psychology of scarcity. Economists and behavioral scientists alike note that scarcity increases perceived value. When a resource is abundant and accessible without effort, people take it for granted. The same is true for human presence. If you are endlessly available, your availability loses meaning. If you are selective, your attention becomes a reward. This principle explains why the strategic individual earns more respect with fewer gestures than the nice guy does with constant self-sacrifice. Practical application involves both verbal and nonverbal dimensions. Verbally, avoid excessive justification when declining a request. A simple "I'm not available" communicates more authority than a lengthy explanation filled with excuses. Non-verbally, posture, eye contact, and tone matter. A man who speaks calmly, pauses intentionally, and maintains steady presence exudes confidence even before his words are processed. Equally important is consistency. One powerful moment of assertion cannot undo months of submissive behavior. Image is cumulative. Each interaction either strengthens or weakens the narrative others construct about you. This is why deliberate self-management is not performance but discipline. You are training others how to interpret you. The implication is profound. If you do not take control of your image, others will build one for you, and rarely in your favor. Colleagues, acquaintances, even close friends will unconsciously categorize you based on patterns of behavior. Once formed, these perceptions are difficult to reverse. Thus, the strategic individual approaches reputation as an asset, one that requires cultivation and defense. This brings us to a final, subtle yet powerful tool in the arsenal of respect: the use of silence. In a culture of constant noise, silence creates mystery, authority, and influence. The way you withhold as much as the way you express shapes the narrative others construct about you. Silence is one of the most underestimated tools of power. In a world conditioned to constant explanation and justification, silence disrupts patterns. It forces others to question, to reveal more, and to confront their own behavior. From a psychological standpoint, silence creates cognitive dissonance. When expectations for immediate response are unmet, people become uncomfortable and often disclose more than they intended. What appears passive is in fact active control of the dynamic. Strategically applied silence projects authority. When insulted, it denies validation to the aggressor. When pressured, it reclaims time for reflection. When confronted with manipulation, it shifts the burden back onto the manipulator. In each case, silence is not absence, it is presence magnified. It signals that you operate on your own terms, not according to others' urgency. Yet silence alone is insufficient. To be fully respected, one must cultivate unpredictability. Predictable patterns are exploitable. If people know you will always agree, always forgive, or always react in anger, they can design their behavior around those expectations. But when your responses are thoughtful, varied, and tailored to the situation, you cannot be reduced to a formula. This unpredictability forces genuine engagement. It ensures that your yes carries weight, your no commands respect, and your presence becomes valuable precisely because it is not guaranteed. The synthesis of these principles, boundaries, emotional discipline, deliberate image silence, and unpredictability produces a transformation. Respect is no longer something you chase. It is something you command. Kindness, when paired with strength, becomes meaningful rather than disposable. The ultimate message is clear. Stop living as the endlessly agreeable man who is remembered only for his availability. Begin living as the strategic man whose presence, words, and actions carry undeniable weight. Respect is not granted. It is taught. And the way you teach others to treat you will determine whether you remain forgettable or unforgettable.